I'm Amy Bull in River Networks, VP of Comms, and I'm joined today by Brenna Goggin, who's our Leadership Development Director, and Sam and Javon from the Kellogg Foundation, who will introduce themselves in a minute. I'll give it just another minute or two to see if other folks join, and then we'll get started. We still have a few folks kind of trickling in, so we'll give it one more minute. All right, looks like it's slowing down a bit, so I'm gonna kick us off. Like I said, somebody joined after I had already said this piece, but I'm Amy Bull. I'm River Networks Vice President of Communications. And we're thrilled that you're here today. We're really excited to bring folks from Kellogg to the network and present this awesome webinar. If you were at River Rally in 2024 in Grand Rapids, Sam and Javon were there with us and presented this same session or version of this session, I suppose. And I've seen it a few other times. It's really wonderful. And yeah, so I'm joined today by River Networks Leadership Development Director, Brenna Goggin, who's been in the chat. And yeah, like she said, we'll be keeping an eye on that and pull out some questions for Q&A at the end. And I think with that, I'll hand it over to Sam and Javon to get us started today.
Thank you so much, Amy. While Javon is pulling up Javon is faster than I thought. Welcome to our session, Advancing Equity and Justice Through Strategic Communication. My name is Samantha Meinke, and I'm a communications officer with the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. We are based in Battle Creek, Michigan, and I work directly with our Michigan programming team. We work at the policy advocacy and systems level at the state. And then we work directly in 3 cities that are built around rivers, Battle Creek, Detroit, and Grand Rapids. Before working for the Kellogg Foundation, I was the communications manager at the Michigan State Bar Association and a newspaper reporter and a magazine writer and editor. And Javon, it looks like our slides are not advancing. Just wanted to give you, there we go. That worked. Javon, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure thing. Thanks, Sam. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Javon Dobbs. I'm also a communications officer at the WK Kellogg Foundation. I'm also based out of Michigan. Um, I was at the River Network last year, the rally rather. We were in Grand Rapids, which is my hometown. So it was really great to be with many of you there or some of your colleagues in person. And so we're happy to bring this to you virtually, a revised version that kind of meets the moment we're in. But I've been at the Kellogg Foundation for almost 9 years. I support strategic communications across a few different portfolios of work, including our impact investing program, which is focused on many endowments, including the Kellogg Foundation, also make capital investments into small business owners or other types of for-profit organizations that not only do investment financial returns, but also have a social good. And I'll give you an example of what that looks like a little bit later. I also support communications for our endowment. So the folks who are focused on driving returns to fuel our grant making. And then we also have a fellowship program called the Community Leadership Network, which we're actually getting ready to launch some applications pretty soon. So stay tuned. But it's open to community leaders who are really focused on advancing racial equity, community engagement, leadership in their own communities. And then finally, work with our Racial Equity 2030 Challenge, which is focused on advancing racial equity with 5 grantee partners that are working across the globe. So I'm really excited. Sam and I are both really excited to be with you again today. So thanks for taking the time to join us.
Absolutely. And just to give you a little more of an idea of who we are at the Kellogg Foundation, just very briefly, we're driven by a vision of a world where every child has the opportunity to thrive. And we know that the systems that most affect young children, the food, health, education, and economic systems are not working for everyone. And that means that there are lifelong consequences for children, families, and their communities. So, with children at the center, our work supports community-driven solutions. We fund programs, services, and efforts to change systems so that they work better for everyone. By listening to communities, developing leaders, and working toward racial equity and racial healing, we're joining partners to help children and families have the greatest opportunities for success. For today's agenda, you can see what we're looking to talk to you guys about here on the screen, but we wanted to ground what we're doing today by saying and acknowledging that we're all living through a very, very tough moment right now where nonprofit organizations are at risk of losing funding and under attack, especially if they're working in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space and in the environmental justice space. We're aware of that. We see you guys. We're right there with you. And so what we're going through today, we've put together to try to help you guys best navigate this moment. We want to help you understand how making an investment in strategic communications and being proactive about how you handle communications can really help you focus your efforts where they're going to be most effective, reducing your need to react to things and helping you prioritize what really matters so that what you do goes directly towards supporting your goals and you can let go of things that are less important and not serving your organization as well. We think this will help you, especially in this moment, as we're undergoing so many crises at once. So that's why we're going to take some time to talk about how crisis communications planning fits into your overall strategic communications planning and how best you can plan to weather the storms ahead. At the end of our session, we're also going to introduce you to a free online tool that we have built in collaboration and with guidance from our grantee partners across the country and internationally that will help you build a strategic communications plan and can also provide you free resources on how to handle different communications challenges. And that tool is completely free to use. And after we've gone through the session today, I think using the tool is going to be really easy for you because we're going to explain why each of the components of it is important.
Okay, so why strategic communication? Some of you may be familiar with strategic communication and others less so. Regardless of your familiarity, we want to help strengthen your framework for how to think, plan, and act with the communications lens to further your work. So let's get into it. So what is strategic communication? So we have sort of a definition here, but it's not a lengthy plan. It's not just a document in itself. It's really a mindset to how you approach your work and really thinking strategically about communications at the front end. Like when you're designing programs, you're thinking about what outcomes you seek, what audiences you want to prioritize and engage, which campaigns, events, or policy items you want to elevate, and then what strategies and tactics you want to employ. And we're going to get into some of that in our conversation today. I know that the River Network includes organizations of all types. Some of you are wearing very many hats and you are, riding various different waves of what's going on organizationally or societally. what we want to do, even if you are a small team and you have limited capacity, we want to provide these tools and these skills and tools in this, online platform to be able to help support the work that you do in a very like more seamless way that really adds that's really a value add and a time saver, and even some ways it can be maybe a resource saver for many of you who maybe have a different type of capacity when it comes to communication. Okay, so let me transition here. So it's a mindset. We are all communicators. All of you have the ability. You're you know your mission. You live it. You breathe it. Right every day. So all of us have communication skills. How we apply those skills vary, but it's really important for us to think about the strategic impact that communications can have as it relates to our work. And it's not only reaching donors and funders, but it's also even the people that you are impacting, whether it's students in the community, whether it's your volunteers, whether it is community residents, making them aware of certain things that are like climate related things that are going on, river related things that are going on in their community. So I'll give you just one quick example, and then I will invite Sam to share one of, that she has. So I talked a little bit about our impact investing work, which may or may not be familiar to many of you, but that's okay. You can Google it when you get a chance. But just to kind of paint the picture of what that looks like, and the Navajo Nation is one of the largest sovereign tribes that borders the United States. It borders, I believe, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico, if I'm correct. In Navajo, there's still a lot of community members who don't have access to electricity. So the Kellogg Foundation, made an investment in a company called Navajo Power that's building utility scale solar power in the Navajo Nation and other tribal communities, helping people who currently don't have access to electricity get it, but then even more commercially be able to use that solar power to power other communities, even outside of tribal communities. But knowing that all of those sort of benefits will go back into indigenous communities. And so what we did at the earlier onset of 2024 is we use the power of earned media. So earned media is when you're pitching reporters, your local news, your TV news reporters, blogs, podcasts, and the earned side is you're getting publicity for your work, and you don't necessarily have to pay for it outside of like time and effort, as compared to paid media, which we'll talk about later. So we partner with Navajo Power, who was really wanting to tell their story and get more visibility to the work that they're doing. And so we pitched some different national media outlets, and we're actually able to help them get a spot on the Earth Day special with ABC News in April of 2024. That was able to get them millions of views. They were able to tell their story really creatively and powerfully, able to talk about sort of some of the historical systemic injustices where they had power lines going from a community to communities outside of their native nation to power them, but homes right under didn't even have access to electricity. So that led to them being able to actually cross the finish line with some prospective investors. So we're talking about millions of dollars in investments that went back into this community that will also support those native communities that they're working with. So I'll leave it to Sam to share another really cool example that she had.
Yeah. My example is of a different type of organization from you, but it is rooted in how they navigated a crisis in order to progress their work in a way that they didn't expect they would be able to. So the partner that I want to lift up is Detroit PBS. They have been a longtime grant partner of ours in Detroit, Michigan. And in early 2020, when we were all confronted by the terrible crisis that was the COVID-19 pandemic, our partners at Detroit PBS responded to that brilliantly. They had been doing a lot of community engagement work in person with parents and children across the city of Detroit. And when they saw that people were having to stay home and that parents were trying to educate their children at home while they were also trying to juggle jobs and everything else that was happening with the pandemic, they jumped into action and began devoting the bulk of their community engagement resources to providing daily emails to parents across Michigan and then later across the country that shared curriculum aligned resources to support parents as they tried to educate their children at home. And they sent these emails out every day to try to be a support system to parents in that really, really difficult time. Now, prior to that, Detroit PBS had been trying to build something called the Michigan Learning Channel, where they wanted to make educational programming available 24 hours a day to children across the state of Michigan. And they were having a lot of trouble getting funders to understand the power of that vision, and they were not able to get it funded. But when this crisis arose in the pandemic, and they responded so brilliantly with so many resources, making life a little bit easier for parents and helping children who were struggling to access education because they didn't have internet access. I did a story about the work they had done that was published on our Every Child Thrives platform at the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. And Detroit PBS took that story, built it into a pitch package that they gave to the governor of Michigan. And the governor of Michigan gave them a $3 million grant to kickstart the Michigan Learning Channel in Michigan. So today, 5 years later, the Michigan Learning Channel is reality, and it is available on every PBS station in Michigan. We have 6 across Michigan. So every child, no matter what their access is to resources, has the ability to access the Michigan Learning Channel in every part of the state, rural, urban, everywhere. And I raise that to you because I recognize we're in a moment of crisis right now, and it feels like everything could come crashing down to an end. But if you are thoughtful and you're strategic about the opportunities that are available to you in this crisis, you actually can make progress happen over time and continue to work toward your goals if you're strategic.
Wow, what a beautiful, brilliant example. And thank you, Sam, for the work you did to help make that happen. So always one of my favorite examples to share. So as we hop into it some more, we're going to talk about communications planning. So these are 5 steps, and these are sort of a baseline, just like programming, right? You got to identify your goals. What are you trying to achieve, right? You don't want to just jump to tactics. You want to, what are your goals? Audience, we'll talk about that in depth. Craft your approach, assess the key tactics that you want to employ, and then evaluate. Evaluation is important. It's something you want to think about at the onset of your strategic communications planning. And this is what I'll also say. Us, Sam and I, as communications officers, communications professionals, our job is to work collaboratively with our programming team to be able to create strategic communications plans and tactics that align with our programmatic goals, right? And so it's so important that if you do have communication staff or if you don't, to make sure you're thinking you're thinking program strategy, but you're also thinking about what communication strategies coalesce with this plan to really make it sing and soar. And one model that I use, and here's another Google opportunity, it's an acronym. It's called SOSTAC, SOSTAC, SOSTAC. The acronym stands for situation, objective, strategy, tactic, action, and control. I use this often. It just helps me. I'm a deep planner. It helps me think about, okay, where are we at situationally right now? Like, what's the environment like? What are the sort of goals and objectives that we have? And this could be for a big initiative, or it can be something really more small. Maybe it's an event that you have going on. What are the strategies that we want to try to get us to the end of our goal? And then what are those tactics that help to drive that strategy? Action is who's doing what, who's on point. Role clarity is so important when it comes to all of our work, especially communications. And then control is that measurement piece, like being able to think at the onset, what are some ways we're going to gauge whether we're successful or not? And these are living, breathing. plans. These are not static and concrete, and we can't be nimble and flexible to what we're learning as we go about it, and also in being able to adapt it in the future. And so with that said, I'll pitch it back to Sam to talk about goals.
Yeah, so when you're doing strategic communications, step one is always to identify your goals. And we are going to recommend that you identify what we call SMART goals, because it can be very easy to set a goal that's very nebulous, and that is not actually setting a goal that's going to be helpful for you. When we say SMART goals, what we mean is goals that are specific, measurable, attainable, realistic and relevant, and time-bound. And to give you an example of a SMART goal that I know probably all of you have set before, or you know people who have set them, we have conversations about this every year, is New Year's resolutions. And so I'll share my New Year's resolution for this year so we can fit it into this SMART goal metric to help you guys understand how you can do this yourselves. So my New Year's my New Year's resolution this year was to read one book every month that is just mine. I knew it was going to be a year, like a tough year. And so my New Year's resolution was to give myself the gift of reading a book that is not related to my work or the tough moment we're in, but just something that I can enjoy every month. And so the reason this is a SMART goal is it's specific. One book per month, 12 books for the year. That's easy to measure. I can absolutely measure easily if I've read that book every month. After 3 months, I've read 3 books. So I can keep track of where I stand on this goal. It's attainable and it's realistic and relevant. I made this goal knowing that theoretically I could fit this into my busy life. And, if I really wanted to achieve it, I absolutely could. And then it's time bound because this is a goal that I've made for this year. So it's time bound to this year. And it's something that I can evaluate month by month to adjust what I'm doing in order to be able to make my goal happen.
Sam, you all good with goals? You ready to move on to
Yep.
audiences? All right,
Sorry,
perfect.
I should have been like, that's it.
No worries. Thank you. And by the way, like as Amy and Brandon mentioned in the beginning, feel free to drop questions in the chat throughout. And we would love to learn a little bit more about where is everybody coming from, maybe organizations that you're a part of, and who's joining us today. So we want to know our audience today a little bit more. So please drop that information in chat whenever you get a chance. So we're going to talk about audiences. Audience is so key. So it's really important to define your audience. Who are we trying to reach? Who are the and audiences change. Sometimes you have primary audiences. There may be secondary audiences that you're trying to reach. Maybe you're doing a capital campaign and you're really focused on reaching donors. Okay, not just donors. Donors is very broad. What type of donors? Are you trying to reach new donors? Are you trying to reach younger donors so you have like a longer trajectory with them? Are you trying to reach more senior donors who may be able to bequest something to your organization? Are you trying to reach foundations, community foundations, national foundations, however, as far as donors and funders go? And then secondarily, who are some of the other folks that this campaign or this program are relevant to reach? So think about age groups, think about communities geographically, rural, suburban, urban communities. Are you trying to reach like low to moderate income workers, for example? What neighborhoods or regions are these people that you're trying to reach in? This is something that's so key. And as a communicator, this is a communications professional. This is like one of our pet peeves, amongst a few others. One of our pet peeves is the general audience trap. We're trying to reach everybody and their mother. That is not really realistic when it comes to the work that you're trying to do. You have to think about it. How many emails do you have unread in your inbox right now? And how many of those might be newsletters that you would like to read, but maybe you just haven't got a chance to? Or maybe it's text messages. your favorite show that's premiering. We're inundated with so much information. We have to be strategic enough to be able to break through the noise and find people where they're at. And so when it comes to your audience, we have to sometimes do some research to really figure out who those people are, consider their backgrounds. And one of the things we'll talk about as well is like audience personas. And so let me just move on to this next part here. So when we think about audience, we think about if you're trying to reach community members where you live, what languages do they speak? Now, everybody's an English first language speaker. There may be multiple language spoken. So that means strategically, I am trying to tell folks about I'm trying to mobilize parents around a summer camp that I'm doing that is supporting young elementary age students to learn about conserving the river in their community and being able to have fun, but also learn, and also getting the parents and students engaged with the river in their community, right? Who are the community members that are parents in your community? They may not all just know one language, or they might not all be able to read a newsletter or see a flyer. Maybe we have to use other tactics to reach them. What do they care about? What are the common values? It's so important right now. We'll talk about sort of values-based messaging in a little bit. Who do they trust? Who are the trusted like spokespeople in the community? Sometimes your organization's best like ambassadors are the volunteers you work with. They may be some of the employees or board members that you have that can also be spokespeople on behalf of your organization. And what motivates the audience members that you have? I'll turn it over to you to Sam to talk about crafting your approach.
Yeah, thanks, Javon. Okay, so you've identified your SMART goal and your primary and secondary audiences. So then how do you craft your approach to your audience in order to achieve your goals? Your approach is how you're developing your strategy. And if you can move to the next slide, Javon. A lot of organizations operate in a responsive way when they handle communications rather than a proactive way. So that means they jump right into tactics like, oh, we need to send an email to our subscribers, or oh, we need a press release, or we need an Instagram story. But to be strategic in communications, you need to do what we've told you to do so far, identify your goals and your audiences. But then instead of jumping right to tactics, instead you need to zoom out and think about all of the communication channels you have available to you. Think about the channels you own, like your website, your newsletters, and your social media presence. Think about when you may want to work with earned media outlets, the news media in your area. Or maybe it's specific news media in your area. Maybe it's your local blogger versus your local TV news. And then think about whether paying for some advertising, whether it's social media advertising, or maybe it's an ad in an event program that's coming up. That might be a good fit. But in order to put your channels to the best use to reach the audiences you've identified to achieve your goals, you need to first develop your approach, your strategy, by looking across all of these channels and thinking about the tactics that you should employ to roll out your strategy. The next slide, Javon, if you can. To develop your strategic approach, you need to think about what resources you have available. Like, how much money do you have to invest in this communication effort, if any? How much staff time do you have that you can devote to this? Do you have someone dedicated to communication, or is it just you? What's the most effective way to convince your audience to take action and achieve your SMART goal? We have a bunch of questions here on this slide that you can go through every time you're putting together one of your communication strategies, or your communication strategies overall. Like, by when do you need to act? And are there any special moments like Earth Day that you can consider to try to take advantage of? In particular with the earned media, the news media that we talked about, they're always looking for story ideas that coincide with those special days like Earth Day. And sometimes if you can take advantage of a moment like that, you can gain traction with an issue that you otherwise couldn't. These days, we know trusted messengers are really critical to achieving our goals. So, who are those trusted messengers? Who are your supporters? Who do you think will be against what you're doing, your opponents? What's going on in your community? What opportunities are coming up? How do you mobilize those supporters to help support you during those opportunities? And how do you counteract what your opponents are going to say about what you're doing? What are your strengths that you can leverage? What has worked for you in the past? What hasn't worked? And what pitfalls should you avoid? And what obstacles do you foresee being an issue? And to go back to the examples we lifted up earlier, we know that with the Navajo Nation example, where Javon was talking about how we had worked with them to get them on ABC nightly news during Earth Day. Most people had no idea about how federal policy had extracted resources from Navajo Nation, how those power lines were going, the giant power lines were going over their heads, connecting other communities to power, to electricity, while excluding them from access to that power grid and to clean drinking water too. So it was really important to educate people about that history so they could understand how important it is to have Navajo Power lead the solution to their community's problems themselves. And that was a critical part of that news broadcast. And then with the Detroit PBS example that I lifted up, like nobody could understand how powerful it would be to have a Michigan Learning Channel available across the state of Michigan for all of the children. And it wasn't until Detroit PBS showed how effectively they could help support parents and families during the COVID-19 crisis that they were able to make the case that investing in the Michigan Learning Channel was really good for all parents and children in Michigan. And it was only through taking advantage of that crisis that they were able to convince people to invest in the resource. So again, before we get to tactics, we have to ask all of these questions and look across all of our channels and be really thoughtful about what we do, because we know we have limited resources at our disposal, limited money, limited staff time, and we have to use them to our best advantage to achieve our goals. And Javon is going to tell us how we can do that by choosing the right tactics after doing that scan.
Sam. Yeah, so I always like to think goal is where we're going, strategy is how we get there, and our tactics are the thing that drives where we're how do we get there. And so tactics, there's tons of things that you can do, but you really want to think about some of the. Sorry. Again, here are some questions you can think about. You know, where do your audience get their information from? What's your timeline? What timeline are you working with? Is this like rapid response communications, or it like sometimes I think we impose like these timelines that are not realistic. This again is a communications pet peeve. Is okay. You want to. I was just talking to my colleagues about something. For example, usually like personally, if I'm trying to launch like an initiative or make an announcement or like an application for something, Mondays are usually not good because most people are just getting into the work week. They're trying to get through their inboxes. They're trying to get their bearings for what they need to accomplish that week, right? And then also too, from like a staff perspective, we need time to like kind of, if we're doing updates to the website, if we're getting our social media, sort of graphics in the queue to get ready to go out, like you need time to do that. And so launching something on a Monday means you're gonna be cramming to try to get this campaign launched versus like a Tuesday is so much better because we can use Monday to get ourselves prepared, do our quality control to make sure like our T's are crossed, our I's are dotted, and then we can get the campaign out and it feels a lot more. It just flows a lot better. And so those are the types of things you got to think about when you think about tactics too. And what tactics do you have experience with in the past? Like, do you have a really great newsletter? Like, that's your brand and butter is your newsletter. You get good engagement. People are reading it. People are clicking the links. People are coming to events. People are getting involved. People are donating as a result of this newsletter. If it's working, don't just switch up and decide we're gonna start a podcast and we're not gonna do the newsletter again. So it's really important to think about what's worked before and what hasn't, and then sometimes you can also test some new ideas out. Okay, let me transition to here. So this is just a few examples of some of the different types of tactics you can do. Asking the questions that I talked about before, I think are important because sometimes we try to identify a tactic that doesn't really match the strategy, right? And so we want to make sure that this makes sense for where we're trying to go. A website could be one of those tactical things. Again, you see, like sometimes people jump right here to these things that they want to do tactically, but they don't really have a goal in mind, right? But these are ways to sort of advance that strategy, to advance your programmatic goals, blogs, e-newsletters, events, polling, phone calls. A lot of people are using SMS, not just during election cycles, but using them throughout the year to really curate an audience. We've seen a lot that newsletters are doing really well because it's a way to really meet a particular audience and curate them. They have there's almost, you can set an expectation of like, this newsletter is going to go out every third Thursday of the month, and people know when it's coming. They're expecting it to come. They're reading it. They're engaging with it, and you can tweak it along the way. So these are just a few examples of things that you can consider when it comes to some of your tactics. And the other piece that I would say, like a pro with these tactics, like for a newsletter example, like you can control the narrative, right? This is a place and a way for you to control the story that you want to tell. One of the maybe pitfalls or cons to it is that you may have a more limited audience, but that's okay. Again, back to audience. If are you trying to reach, like, just throw spaghetti out there and hope it sticks, or you're trying to just really cater to, even if it's 100 people that are dedicated, they're engaging, those are the people that you want to continue to reach, and then try to bring in other people to the fold as you go along. Here's another area that I think is really important. I know Sam, as a former journalist, really loves some of this area in particular when it comes to media relations. So press releases are one way to get your news out there, but also think about op-eds or blogs, hosting press conferences, doing statements. When it comes to media, it's really important that we understand a lot of people, there's a lot of great local news organizations in the communities that you're in. There's a lot of great reporters. There's like ethnic media that are maybe in a different, not, in Spanish or in Burmese or a different language that matches the community that you're in. You can think about working with these sort of other news outlets to reach an audience that's really important to you. It gives you broader reach. It allows you to have like a different messenger. Like if a trusted reporter can talk about your work, they're bringing a level of like validity, like a third party talking about the work that you're doing. Some of the cons to media outreach is that you can't always control the narrative, or you can't control the narrative necessarily. That you can control the quotes or the things you might say, but how those quotes are packaged can depend from one reporter to another, right? They have editorial control of what they put out there. But the more you engage with reporters and news organizations, I know here, so for example, I used to live in Battle Creek, Michigan, and we had like this publication called The Shopper that would come. It was free. It would just show up to your door. But I read The Shopper probably more than I read the local newspaper because it had news updates, it had events. It came and it was free, but The Shopper was like my go-to. Like, what's going on in Battle Creek? Like, what events are coming up? What can my kids do this weekend? I don't have any plans. Like, The Shopper was like a go-to. So what are some of those other sort of maybe non-traditional media outlets in your community that you can tap into? It's really important to think about that. And then lastly, I'll say when it comes to reporters and media, like reporters are people. they don't want to only be reached out to when you want something for them. You can also reach out to them to build a relationship with them. Even if it's just one reporter that you like to read that's reporting on things that are related to your work, you could just read an article and figure out a way to get their email and say, hey, I read this, I work at this organization. I really love how you broke this issue down. This is really awesome writing or something like that. And as you kind of reach out to them quarterly or every now and then, when you do have a press release or you do have an announcement coming up or something relevant to your work, they'll remember, oh, hey, I know this person at this organization. They might be a good person to quote for a story I'm working on. Or, yeah, I'll definitely run this lead on this story because they know who you are, right? And it doesn't have to be super scattered. Like, we're going to reach out to every media outlet in our community. No, you can just pick like 2 or 3 that you really want to focus on. And lastly, I'll say with paid advertising. So social media ads are can be really helpful because you can decide the dollar amounts that you want to put, and you can target specific audiences on social media, whatever channels you're using, whether it's LinkedIn or Instagram or different other meta like Facebook and so forth. You can think about banner ads on different websites. Maybe there's like I don't know, like an environmental justice blog or something in your community. You can think about, hey, we can put some advertising there, or the newspaper, or even billboards. Billboards are a lot more expensive than maybe doing social media ads, but they can be highly relevant to sharing about an event or some type of initiative that's going on in your community. And one of the things that we're learning, and this is not the case for everybody, but we're learning that like LinkedIn is becoming one of those more trusted places that people are going. Certain types of audiences, right? It's going to become more of a trusted place because it's not getting into a lot of the sort of vitriol that can go on social media. It's a little bit more professionalized. So that may be an avenue to consider if you haven't used LinkedIn before. All right, Sam, I'll turn it to you on the evaluation.
Yeah, thanks, Javon. Okay, so we have set our SMART goals, identified our primary and secondary audiences, defined our approach, developed our tactics, and we cannot forget that we need to also evaluate our progress. So the next slide, Javon. Evaluation should not just come at the end of your communications project or program or your entire communications strategic plan. It is something that you need to consider at the outset of your project. That's why we want to set SMART goals, so that we're setting goals that we set ourselves up to measure our progress toward over time. Whenever possible, it's important to gather baseline data at the beginning so that you can measure the impact that your communications investment has had. And you shouldn't measure impact just at the end, by the way. That's something that you should be doing on a continuous basis so that if what you're doing strategically is not working, you can shift tactics in the middle of your campaign or your strategy in order to make a bigger impact in the end. Measuring success and adapting your strategy is key to success. As Javon said earlier, communication strategy should not be a static document that you create and then put on a shelf to collect dust somewhere. It should be something that's guiding what you're doing, and you should view it as something that is a living, breathing document that changes as the context that you're operating in changes, especially in this moment in time. So some examples of ways that you can measure success include things like polling, surveying, and conducting focus groups or just information gathering sessions with people that you're trying to impact. That one way that you can use those is to run messaging by people to see if it is impactful. Another way you can do that is to run the poll before you deploy whatever your tactics are, and then run the poll again after to see if you have a measurable impact based on that. That's really helpful to measure things like narrative change, shifts in sentiment and awareness, and just like what people know about things. By setting metrics to which you can refer back to and accurately measure progress. It can help you identify what works for your audiences, what doesn't work, and how you should adjust and where you have gaps in your strategy. It's also important to make sure that you're holding internal debriefs with anybody that is out with a public-facing lens or public-facing voice, so that I know for our organization anyway, sometimes if folks are not briefed, they can go out and continue to share information and messaging that does not work. And you want to make sure that that doesn't happen, that what you're learning gets communicated across your team so that you're working in tandem toward your strategy. And then, Javon, if you want to move to the next slide, I think we have an example of fundraising. So we've created this example to kind of give you guys a look at what a sample strategic fundraising communication strategy could look like. So if you set your SMART goal that you want to pitch 5 funders by the end of the year on supporting a new program that trains and builds capacity for community leaders to be environmental advocates in their communities. That's a SMART goal that touches back to what we talked about earlier. You've identified that your audience is local, regional, and national funders whose values and priorities align with your program. And it's 5 of those, right? We've made it just 5 so that we can measure that. We've then determined that our approach should be to build and strengthen relationships with our target funders, that we should develop targeted communication and materials that speak to each of their values and priorities to meet them where they're at, and that our tactics to reach them should be to pitch philanthropy news media about what we're doing, to develop targeted funder briefs for each of those funders that, again, are aligned to their values and priorities, and then share impact stories through the newsletter that you've developed or that you have, so that people can see the impact that the work you have has. There's nothing that convinces funders that they should invest in you like impact of previous funding. And then to evaluate, just keep track of the funders who have been contacted, keep track of the meetings that have been held, and of the progress that you're making toward successfully pitching those funders for that additional funding. So Javon, I think we're going to shift gears now and have you talk to us about crisis communication and meeting the moment. Oh, you're muted, Javon.
Thanks, Sam. So again, like Sam mentioned in the beginning, like we know that there's sort of layers of crisis that different organizations, particularly like smaller nonprofit organizations, are going to. We know that there is opposition and pushback against environmental justice, against issues of belonging and inclusion, against global humanitarian aid. There's so many different layers of crises that's going on right now, whether it's locally, state, or federally. Having a plan is so important, and we want to equip you with some ideas, some steps that you can take to think about those plans, so that you can be sort of prepared for different scenarios that may come up, and you don't have to always be reactive to things in the moment, because a lot of times we know that these crises become distractions that really can veer you away from doing like the day-to-day work that's so important to you. And so here are just like some of the best practices to keep in mind. Thinking about messaging, preparing messages in advance. Like when we're dealing with different crisis situations at the Kellogg Foundation, oftentimes we draft what we call a holding statement. In case stuff happens, this is how we might communicate this issue to a reporter or to a community member or to an investor or board member. These are some of the things that we think about. Having a plan is so important, to think about, like, if these different scenarios, who are the point people, how do we come to decisions, gathering all the facts, identifying validators, even organization people outside of your organizations, and monitoring. Like one simple way that you can monitor even conversations that are going on about your organization is using Google Alerts. You can set up search keywords of your organization or different topics, campaigns that are going on. It's like a free way, and it goes right into your inbox, and it tells you like over the last week, these are some of the things that were mentioned about either like members of my organization or my organization as a whole. And one of the things I'll say is like ignoring media is not a good thing to do, because it doesn't allow you to share a counter narrative. If there is a narrative or some false information or even something that just happens, right? If you ignore the media, you don't have a chance to share your point of view. So it's really important to consider how you respond to different things that go on from a crisis situation. And Sam, I'll just run through these steps really quickly for the sake of time, because we want to leave some time open for Q&A. So what's really important here is thinking about the decision approval process. Like, who are the people that are going to help us decide in advance should a crisis come up, whether it is a climate related event that goes on in our community. Unfortunately, like, life happens. We may have some type of internal event happen. Maybe there's someone passes away, so you have to do some internal communications around that. Other types of situations, reporters reaching out about things that are going on or something that they heard about. Think about that event in advance. Like, who are the key people within your organizations, and not just being one person if you can, because sometimes people are not readily available. Defining what is a crisis to us. Not everything that comes up is necessarily something that you have to respond to. So deciding in advance, like, what are some of the potential risks that we might deal with, and how should we come up with those? Also, flagging crisis, like doing some of that monitoring. If something happens, and for example, if a reporter could reach out to one of your employees or a board member, how should they shouldn't just decide to respond without consulting the organization first. So how do you flag those types of crisis situations that happen? And then the appropriate steps. And so you may decide to respond to a reporter via email versus having an interview with them. You may decide to put out a statement on your website. There's different types of tactics that you can do. And then also sort of evaluating after the fact, like, how you can solve some of those issues. And then lastly, I'll say, and I know we're kind of out of time here, so I'm going to wrap up. We're in turbulent times, we know it. Now's the time to really lean into your values. Really think about values-based messaging. What are things that can kind of bridge those divides language-wise to help people understand the community benefit of the work that you do? One of the organizations that we appreciate as far as some of the products they put out there is called Opportunity Agenda. They have this framework called BPSA. It's values, problem, solution, action. Starting with the values first often draws people in versus pushes people out, instead of starting with the problem first. Be authentic, do storytelling to let the work speak for itself, and be nimble. Okay, lastly, we have this great resource called the Strategic Communications Planning Hub. Here is I'm not gonna do the video. Here's a QR code. Check it out. It's free. It has templates. It has videos. It has media relations, how to develop messaging, how to do crisis communications, how to develop a funding strategy to reach funders, all types of things. So take a moment to check out this QR code. Go to strategiccommunicationstools.com and check out this free resource. All right, I think we're down to a few more minutes for Q&A.
Javon, I'll just jump in to also add that Strategic Communications Hub has a really great tool called the Build a Plan tool. So if your organization hasn't refreshed your strategic communications plan, or you don't have one in the first place, you can go through that tool and just answer questions that track really closely to the presentation we just gave you. And at the end, it will give you a starting strategic communications plan. Again, you shouldn't let that sit on a shelf and just collect dust. Like, it should be a living document, but you'll have a starting point by using that. Oh, and I see Amy's used Build a Plan. Woo!
Yeah, I love it. It's really helpful. Use my cat for a moment. Let's see. So I think the main question in the chat that we saw was around a couple of slides and how they were related to audience personas. Just so you like to
I'm sorry.
to.
I'm sorry. I got so excited I skipped over that. But just quickly on audience personas. So audience personas is a way for us to hypothetically think about a type of audience that we're trying to reach. So, for example, we can think of like creating a hypothetical person that we really think represents the type of community member that we're trying to reach. I'm hosting a day at the river event for parents and children on a Saturday. I'm trying to reach uh, some working professionals that will not only get and bring their kids to this event, but also maybe consider getting involved as a volunteer or being a donor, right? So I create an artist persona, and his name's Dwayne. Dwayne works in IT. Dwayne works 9 to 5. He doesn't have a whole lot of time, like throughout the business day, to engage in different things. But he might take his son or daughter to this event on a Saturday. So I decided to use LinkedIn to reach Dwayne, who works in IT, and I use messaging that kind of relates to something that he's curious about. He cares about his community. We let him know that, you know, the river is a key place. We have a fun event coming up. Check it out. So personas are a way just to hypothetically think about the types of people that we're trying to reach. Or maybe there is a community member you know of and you can interview them. You can talk to them. What are the ways that you're getting information? What resonates with you in these different messages that we're considering? Or you know, even talking to other organizations in your community who do similar work. Who are the audiences that you're trying to reach in these different ways? So those are some of the things we think about when we think about personas and trying to like narrow down an audience.
Thank you. Are there
I
any
also
other?
saw that there was a comment about somebody wanting to use SMS or text messaging as a communications channel. And I just wanted to jump in to say, I think that's a great idea, especially if you're trying to reach people in a community that doesn't have a lot of access to the internet. That is a wonderful way to reach those folks. And we have a partner called Outlier Media in Detroit that is using SMS in a really cool way to, they're a community-based, solutions-oriented media outlet. They're a little different from traditional mainstream media. And I think they're using SMS in a really cool way that I would advise you guys to think about, which is a two-way communication tool versus just a means of blasting information to people. They're using SMS to get ideas for stories by having people in the community text their reporters with any challenges they're experiencing. And by doing that, they found out that a lot of households in Detroit were losing access to the water system. They were having their water shut off by the city for not being able to keep up with their bills. But the city was not making paths to affordable payoffs available to a lot of people. So that became a big thing that they reported, and they were able to make change happen in the community. So they reported out the stories about what they were doing and what city officials were doing to change that, but they wouldn't have known about that in the first place if they weren't open to getting information from their audience in addition to sending information to them. So I would just advise that if you're taking on a new type of communication, that you think about how that platform differs from the other channels you have and try to use it to its best advantage.